Well, it looks like Zcash is all up in the headlines. From this recent price surge out of nowhere to all these headlines talking about Zcash and the future it holds. But with all I said, something doesn't smell right. So in this video here, I want to share my 2 cents on it and of course get your take. Let's dive in. All right, so I want to take a minute, share my 2 cents on this whole Zcash pump and the fact that privacy is now a talking point in the mainstream headlines, and in particular Zcash. And so just out of sheer curiosity, I decided to do some deep dive investigative type of work just to ask some simple questions. And if everything is centered around privacy, then of course Monero, being numero uno, is being silenced, but then again it hasn't received the same level of attention as Zcash, and so clearly there's something suspicious behind that. And I think it has a lot to do with institutional adoption and the deceptive practices of trying to steer people towards price appreciation with Zcash so that at some time down the line, they can perhaps dump it on the Joe and Jane that's chasing some profits right now. Just more so because the overall crypto market has been somewhat flatlined, given that gold and silver has gotten a lot of attention. And so people need ways to stir hype in order to make profits so that they can pump and dump. And so it's been, what, almost 3 years now since we've actually had a somewhat altcoin mania where people just invest in anything that goes up and then you dump it last minute. And so now, will Zcash be the same thing? I don't know, but I want to just walk through some headlines here, share my 2 cents, and of course get your take. So as always, if you guys want to see short, quick takes like this, hit that thumbs up button to show your support for the channel, and then drop a comment down below. Let me know your take on this matter or any other subject matter that you find important. And then also, if you're new, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification so you stay plugged in. And if there's any value share at all, which of course there will be, take it and share it so more people can get an alternative perspective on what's trending in the news. Okay, so let's jump right in. So as of today, here we have the last year's activity with Zcash. And so right now, Zcash is number 11, ranked 11 out of all the thousands, if not, I don't know, maybe a million or so different projects that have been created since 2009, with of course Bitcoin being the first. But if you just look at this chart here to see that literally all this activity has taken place literally, and if I just go back to this chart here, we're looking at the end of September where everything decided to just go ballistic. And so prior to that, for the last year, it was flat. I mean, completely flat. No activity whatsoever, to the point where it was at a recent low, a year low, at about 29.31. So to go from 29.31 all the way up above 600 says a lot within a year. And then if you look at the last month, from a low of 194 up to 719, it looks like November 7th, it's consolidated a little bit, but then again, trending back towards 700. And so it got me to wondering why exactly now and who's doing this. And so the best way to get a overall synopsis as to what's happening is just to ask a simple question. And so I did that. So I asked a question here on Perplexity, and the simple question is, why has Zcash been pumping in price so much? And of course, the feedback here summarizes it up very well. And as I mentioned before, it's all being done by big money players, not the average Joe and Jane, the actual cyberpunk community, the people who are actually concerned with privacy. It's being driven by institutions, more than likely because they got in early. They probably spent millions, if not $1 billion or so, accumulating over the last several years. And now what they've done is their small investment has turned into 5, 6, 7, 8 times X what they put in. And so literally at some point when they get done riding this wave, say if Zcash get to $1,000 a coin, you bet they're gonna dump it and dump it hard. So that's just something to be aware of. But real quick here, I'll give you an idea as to what it's saying on the back end. It says, Zcash has experienced a significant surge in price recently, jumping from $50 to nearly $700 in just a few months, with the gains sometimes exceeding 1,000%. This dramatic price move is driven by several key factors, according to Perplexity. It says here, a renewed interest in privacy coins, institutional accumulation, technology and use cases, technical market factors, social and community momentum. And so the very first one, institutional accumulation, as I mentioned. Major purchases by institutions like Grayscale and the Winklevoss twins, Cyberpunk Technologies, have had a huge impact. So once again, you go into who has been accumulating, the people with lots of funds, that obviously just these two are what we're being told. They have enough funds to move markets. And when you have a smaller market cap coin, you dump a few billion into it, of course it's going to pump and people are going to take notice. And then all the mainstream crypto community channels will jump on board, hyping it up more. Now you got the average Joe and Jane wanting to speculate, so they're going to jump on board at 300, 400, 500, call themselves riding the wave. But the problem with that is they're not going to know when these two big players, or one of the big players, more likely chooses to dump or to take profit. And when they take profit, it's going to trend downward and then harder downward. Then people are going to panic. Then the average Joe and Jane going to dump. So you see the trend here. But it says these entities have amassed large amounts of Zcash, with Cyberpunk at one point holding 1.25% of the total supply and signaling ambitions to reach 5%, echoing MicroStrategy's approach like Bitcoin. So you have the Winklevoss twins who accumulated 1% of the total supply available with ambitions of going to 5%, mimicking the sailor trade of trying to make a particular coin look so attractable that it's undeniable, where you got an institutional player at the top trying to buy it. The goal is to create fear of missing out, so you got small mom and pops driving it from that point on. Then we got renewed interest in privacy coins, and this is the part where I want to pivot to next, because if privacy is important, you got to ask yourself, why is the mainstream crypto narrative allowed to pump privacy when we know privacy is a no-no from the surveillance state, government-wise, as well as all the surveillance, what you call them, the ledger tracking companies. I can't think of the names of them off the top of my head, but you know who they are if you've been in the crypto space. Rising concerns about digital surveillance, regulatory crackdowns, and the privacy of financial transactions globally have renewed interest in privacy coins like Zcash. It's painting Zcash as one of the premier and most sought after renewed interest in privacy coins like Zcash. But then again, you look at some of the other privacy coins, they haven't pumped nowhere near as much. What I'm talking about is Monero. You got Dash, also got a recent pump. So Zcash unique option for shielded transactions powered by zk-SNARKs, distinguish it from other cryptocurrencies and appeal to users and investors looking for advanced privacy features. So you have the zk-SNARKs technology, which is a primary centerpiece for Zcash. I'm hearing more and more people, especially Andrew Tate, who came out yesterday talking about privacy and stuff like that, trying to drive fear towards privacy. But then again, he mentions the importance of having access to zero knowledge proof, or zk-SNARKs type of technology. So clearly he's got in early trying to pump his bags as well. And so zk-SNARKs is a primary medium that supposedly backs and shields people's privacy. It's a legitimate source, because here we are now talking about privacy coins. But you can ask yourself a question. I don't know much about it from the technical side of things. So you have to wonder, is the privacy side baked into the cake to where it's somewhat close to 100% bulletproof? We're going to find out. Then you got technology use cases. Then it talks about some of the other technical things there worth checking on. And so the next thing I was wondering is, okay, if Zcash is so beneficial and you got the big players driving it, now creating fear of missing out, more people are going to jump on board, and privacy is the narrative because zk-SNARKs is the technology behind it. Does it make it more private than the leading privacy coin, which is at this current moment Monero? And so the next question I put out there was simple. Is Zcash 100% private? And so, of course, at this current moment, 100% is probably not achievable, but let's just say 99.99% according to what we know. Zcash is not 100% private. So that's very upfront and straight and honest. It's not 100%. While it's offering strong privacy features through shielded transactions, many Zcash transactions remain transparent and are publicly viewable, and privacy is ultimately determined by user settings and address choice. So it's private, but you got to jump through a couple loops in order to get that anonymity that people think is available. And so this whole zero knowledge proofs, or zk-SNARKs, obviously is not built into the code to where it's mandatory without any options. So that's something to be concerned with. Then it says here, how ZK privacy works. Zcash employs zero knowledge proofs to enable fully hidden transactions, ensuring sender-receiver amount are private on shielded transactions, but users can also opt for transparent ones similar to Bitcoin. So the fact that you have a switch you can turn on the back end lets us know that not every person who uses it for privacy's sake, A, will be aware of it, B, will actually know how to, and then C, utilizing the technology, whether it's built into the wallet or wherever the vehicle that you're using Zcash on has it built in with all the proper things on the back end. Those are all things to consider, because zk-SNARKs is an option. It's not built into the code. So it says, as of July 2025, only about 20% of Zcash coins are held shielded pool, meaning the vast majority of Zcash activity is not private by default. So here you have a market pumping around the privacy narrative, and then according to information from Wikipedia, only about 20% of the total Zcash coins are actually in a privacy zk-SNARKs protocol. The rest of them, the other 80%, are public knowledge for the most part. So that right there is misleading. But then again, it doesn't matter because it's all about the pump and dump type of thing. It says selective privacy explained. Zcash supports both transparent and shielded addresses, allowing users to choose privacy or compliance depending on their needs. Shielded transactions, encryption so they cannot be traced, but transparent transactions remain visible to anyone on the blockchain. So that, my friends, is the difference between true privacy and the perception of privacy. And it's done by flicking on an option to have it shielded or not. That's a problem. But then again, it doesn't matter, because at this current moment, when you have markets driven by institutions that are trying to create the fear of missing out, with within just the last week, it going up 14.2% from a low of 431 to 705. So within a 7-day period, so we have November 11th, it bottomed out at 431 up to the peak of November 15th of $705. That 300 or so swing was enough for people to not even care or concern themselves with privacy, because they don't want to miss out on price action. Because the crypto community right now is so down and out, because Bitcoin isn't doing what they anticipated to do with, the idea of the Fed supposedly cutting, but they're pivoting now. Then you got all the government shutdown. You got all these risk-on problems the world's facing. The crypto community wants Bitcoin to pump so that it can get to that 200 million, the way that the headline stories would like us believe, which of course those numbers will probably be achievable once the spigot is cut on and they flood the world with currency. But between now and then, there's no way for people to speculate and make proceeds in this type of environment where everything is relatively calm, except for Zcash. And so that leads me to wonder, when we talk about privacy, is private to the point is where we can get it as private as possible. And so I said, is Monero 100% private? Once again, knowing that nothing is 100%, let's just say 99.99 according to what we know. That's just the way to start. It says Monero is considered one of the most private cryptocurrencies. So when we start off with Zcash, it said Zcash is not 100%, but it is not guaranteed to be 100% private in all real-world scenarios. It uses advanced technologies, ring signatures, confidential transactions, and stealth addresses to hide the sender, receiver, and transaction amount in every transaction, making tracing extremely difficult compared to other cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum. Privacy is enforced by default, and transparent transactions are not possible on the Monero blockchain. And so that right there is a key distinction when it comes to privacy. One is fully transparent and a threat to the establishment, I believe. And the reason I say a threat, because we all know that the powers that be attempted to offer a reward for anybody that can crack the code or give up information on how to make things more visible. And what am I referring to? Let's go back to 2020, September 10th, where it says the IRS offers $625,000 bounty to anyone who can break Monero and the Lightning Network. It says the United States IRS has announced a bounty. So that right there lets you know that if they're going to put money on the table, then I would assume, there's no guarantees, I would assume that they perhaps have had some difficulties to where they want to acquire the talents of the cyberpunk/hacker community to see if they can either get some assistance, or once again, that's just an option. Or on the other side of this, it could be one lie and a ploy to get people to think that it's not private. So therefore, people can really buy into it. And the perception would be that it's uncrackable, untraceable. So once again, it's two different narratives. It's up to you to determine whether or not Monero is closest to bit private. Time will tell. But once again, whenever you take your fiat and you go through some exchange, whether it's essentially exchanged, and you get into Monero, more than likely the internet activity somehow, some way, whether your IP address or something, is trackable and traceable. So just keep that in mind. But the fact that they were trying to offer a bounty lets us know that it appears that there might be some difficulties tracking that. But once again, in this world, we don't know what's private, what's not, and we won't know until we get through this current reset structure, where on the other end of this, we'll be able to see who's able to retain more purchasing power relative to the property that they're trying to protect when it comes to their time, energy, and effort, which ultimately need to be stored in some type of medium outside, of course, gold and silver. But if you choose to stay in the digital space in some capacity and you want to shield it, we'll find out down the line who actually is able to accomplish that. But once again, we do know also that privacy is a threat, because computer code, even though it's supposed to be free speech, is not necessarily free when it shields you from the watching eyes that be. And so a good example is just recently, the Samurai Wallet developers sentenced to 5 years in prison for unlicensed money transmitting. So once again, you got individuals that created a scrambler that allowed people to mix funds and to obfuscate it from the public eyes, and to then be able to distribute it in whatever means the users wanted is, once again, not tolerable. And so the fact that they're making an example out of a guy named Keon Rodriguez was sentenced to 5 years in prison last Thursday for his role in creating a Bitcoin mixing service that prosecutors say was used to launder $237 million in dirty money. So we know the cover is dirty money, but it's the idea of the eyes and ears not being able to see coin, which was intended to be a surveillance coin. When they can't see a surveillance coin the way that it was intended, they got a problem. And so they made an example of one individual by giving them 5 years for just writing computer code. So once again, these are some things we're paying attention to. Here to hear what you guys think. If you found value, hit that thumbs up, drop a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on what else other protocols might be of interest to you, because once again, these are all things that fascinate me, so I try to do my due diligence to understand it as best as I can. And of course, before I speculate anything, I want to make sure that, it's something that I think has some upside. So curious to hear you guys on this matter. Definitely check it out. And as always, for those who want some resources, some strategies as to things that might be worth checking into, gold and silver wise, scroll down to the description and definitely take advantage of the opportunities. Peace.